Hey everyone, it's Jan. Welcome back to the Art of Rapid Language Learning, and in this video we're going to talk about effective memorization. So if you want to become fluent in a foreign language, you can't escape from it. Eventually you will have to learn many words. Now the big question is, what's the best way to learn new vocabulary? Well, I'm going to share that with you in this video. Now, let me first share with you why people are not learning words in a very effective way. And I'm going to actually share with you a few strategies from a Dutch scientist, a professor called Gino Kamp. And all these findings have been supported by scientific research. Okay, so he spent many years of his life researching how people learn best. So these tips here do not only apply to learning languages, but learning tips in general. I found that these also apply to language learning. Okay, so tip number one, always learn with context. And I'm going to give you an example so that you know what I mean. Okay, so read the following sentences. Okay, did you read it? Then let's just do a countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so your short-term memory should be empty by now. So what did the previous text say? How much of that information were you able to remember? Probably not much, right? Just a few random sentences. Now, this time we're going to do it again, but we're going to add a title to it. Creating and flying a kite. Now, all of a sudden the text makes a lot more sense, right? Now, the question is, would you be able to better memorize the text when there is a title? And the answer is yes. So, always, when you learn something, always make sure that you understand the context, because when you learn things in context, you're more likely to memorize it. Okay, tip number two, after we absorb new information, we're very likely to forget it. And even if we revise it, we're still very likely to forget it, but the second time you always forget things. It takes a bit longer until you really forget it. So, if you really want to memorize new words, make sure that you revise, and that with certain time intervals. And in the beginning, these time intervals need to be very short. So if you're learning a new word, 1 minute later, you just check again and see if you remember it. And then these time intervals can become longer and longer. So first a minute, then 5 minutes. Maybe a few hours later, then you can revise the same word the next day. Then in 3 days, the intervals become longer and longer, because every time you revise a new word, you become less likely to forget it. And using a system with these time intervals is called spaced repetition. And there are flashcards app like Anki, for example, that use this kind of spaced repetition. So if you want to learn things and put it in your long-term memory, make sure to use spaced repetition. Tip number three, want to learn a new word? Then make sure to make a sentence with that word. And actually it's the same for grammar. So instead of learning all these grammar rules, just look at a rule, maybe have a tutor explain to you how it works, but then immediately start using this new grammar feature, this new grammar rule that you've learned, and start creating sentences with these grammar points. Because this way you're more likely to actually memorize it. It's the same with learning words. Once you start actually using these words really become part of yourself, and you're less likely to forget it. You remember the associative stage that we discussed, or the power of combinations, which we discussed in the last video. Well, the same principle here. Once we actually start using it, producing the language, we become less likely to forget it. So use it or lose it. Tip number four, test yourself. It's said that 70% of the students who fail for an exam originally thought that they were going to pass the exam. So we overestimate ourselves all the time. And that's also the reason why after doing Duolingo or any other language course, once you finally get an opportunity to talk to a native speaker, you're going to be overwhelmed, and you're not going to understand this person. You're going to freeze up. And why is that? Well, you overestimated yourself. You thought you were fluent, but in reality, you have not practiced enough. You have not tested yourself. Okay, so before you really get out there, always, try to perform the skill of speaking a foreign language. Test yourself, and you can do that with the app that I mentioned before, like spatial repetition apps like Anki, that basically shows you certain words and then asks you to translate these words. And this way, that's a really good way to getting feedback, to see where you are, where you still need to improve, and also testing yourself actually helps your brain to become faster at recalling certain things that you have learned. Okay, so if you want to become fluent, test yourself. Helps your brain to quickly generate the language. Now you might think, okay, Jan, thanks for these tips, but these tips don't work for me. Well, science says that that's actually not true. Our brains are the same and they work the same way. It can be that some people have other preferences, but it doesn't mean that these strategies that these study activities are more effective as well. Revising dialogues to expand your vocabulary might be easier than testing yourself with flashcards, for example, but it doesn't mean that it's more effective. It's proven by science. It's often those activities that take more effort or that are slightly more uncomfortable that bring you real results. Now, like practicing your speaking, for example, it's quite uncomfortable, especially in the beginning. You really have to push yourself out of the comfort zone, but these are often the activities that bring you the biggest results. Okay, so some people might say, no, like flashcards are not for me, or I don't like to test myself, I don't like speaking practice. Unfortunately, our brain works the same way, and it's often those activities that bring the biggest results. Okay, so just to wrap it up, you want to become better at memorizing words, then don't start studying just one day before an exam, but spread out your learning. Stop learning words and grammar by heart. Instead, learn a word but then start using it. The same with grammar. You learn a grammar rule, then start using that grammar. That way you're more likely to remember it, and it also trains your brain to quickly produce that language. Stop using fancy apps with multiple choice exercises or other passive learning tools, and don't study too much. 20 minutes per day is often better than 3 hours once per week. Yes, we really recommend, as in this video I mentioned the app Anki a few times. I have a few videos here on our channel where I explain how it works. I will also put a link in the description to those videos so that you can check out Anki yourself. That was it for now, and tomorrow we are going to talk about the problem with comprehensible input. See you in that video.